and are very generous with their time in a way that, if you look at the media,
and are very generous with their time. In a way that if you look at the media, locked safe, decades of secrets, and one princess who finally dared to open it. What Princess Anne discovered inside Queen Elizabeth's most guarded vault has sent shockwaves through the palace walls, revealing truths that could reshape everything we thought we knew about the crown. The discovery. The date was November 20th, 2024. Princess Anne. The Princess Royal stood alone in a private room at Buckingham Palace that few had entered in recent years. In her hands she held a small brass key that had been entrusted to her by her late mother's most senior aide. The key fit a safe that Queen Elizabeth II had kept in her private quarters, a safe that had remained untouched since Her Majesty's passing in September of 2022. For over 2 years, the existence of this safe had been known only to a handful of individuals. Palace officials had debated what to do with it, whether to open it immediately after the Queen's death, or to respect what appeared to be her wishes for privacy. In the end, they had decided to wait to let time pass, to allow the initial grief and chaos of transition to settle before confronting whatever secrets might lie within. But now, with King Charles III well into his reign and the monarchy facing new challenges and questions about its future, the time had come. And it was Princess Anne, the Queen's only daughter and perhaps the family member who understood her best, who had been chosen for this delicate task. The safe itself was not particularly large or ornate. It was a simple steel box, perhaps 2 feet wide and 18 in tall, built into the wall behind a painting in what had been the Queen's private study. The painting, a landscape of the Scottish Highlands that Elizabeth had loved, had been removed carefully, revealing the safe's door with its single keyhole and combination dial. Anne had been given both the key and the combination. 3 palace officials stood nearby, witnesses to whatever was about to unfold, but they kept a respectful distance. This moment belonged to Anne. This moment was between a daughter and her mother's memory. As she turned the key and heard the lock click open, Anne felt her heart rate quicken. She had no idea what she would find. Her mother had been a woman of profound discretion, someone who had kept her thoughts and feelings closely guarded, even from those who loved her most. What had Elizabeth deemed important enough to lock away? What truths had she wanted preserved but protected? The safe door swung open with a soft creak. Inside, organized with the meticulous care that had characterized everything about Queen Elizabeth's life, were several items. A stack of leather-bound journals, their covers worn with age. A sealed envelope bearing the Queen's personal seal, several black and white photographs. A small wooden box, and underneath everything else, a collection of letters tied together with a faded blue ribbon. Princess Anne reached in slowly, carefully, her hand steady, despite the emotion of the moment. She lifted out the first journal and opened it to a random page. The handwriting was unmistakably her mother's. That elegant script that Anne had seen on countless birthday cards and personal notes over the decades. But the words on these pages were not the formal, measured statements of a monarch. They were the private thoughts of a woman, raw and unfiltered in a way that the public had never been allowed to see. Anne closed the journal carefully and looked at the other items. Each one seemed to tell a story. Each one represented a piece of her mother's inner life that had been deliberately hidden from view. And as she stood there, taking in the magnitude of what she had found, Anne realized that opening this safe was not just about discovering secrets. It was about understanding the woman behind the crown in a way that perhaps no one ever had before. Behind the lock, the journals were the first items that Princess Anne examined in detail. There were 7 of them in total, spanning decades of Queen Elizabeth's reign. They were not daily diaries in the traditional sense. Instead, they appeared to be reflections written during moments of crisis or deep personal struggle, times when the Queen had needed an outlet for thoughts and feelings she could share with no one else. The earliest journal dated back to 1952, the year of Elizabeth's succession to the throne following her father's death. The entries from those early months revealed a young woman grappling with enormous responsibility and profound grief. She wrote about the weight of the crown, about feeling unprepared despite years of training, about the loneliness of her position. She wrote about missing her father, desperately and questioning whether she could ever live up to his legacy. These were not the words of the confident, composed monarch the world had come to know. These were the private fears of a 25-year-old woman who had suddenly found herself at the center of an ancient institution, expected to be perfect and infallible when she felt anything but, as Anne read through selected passages. She found entries about moments she remembered from her own childhood. Her mother wrote about the challenges of balancing royal duty with motherhood, about guilt over time spent away from her children, about the impossible choices that came with being both a queen and a mother. Elizabeth described feeling torn between the needs of the nation and the needs of her family, and how that tension never truly went away. Unfounded there were also entries about significant historical events. The Queen had written about the Suez Crisis in 1956, about her real thoughts on the political maneuvering she had witnessed. She had recorded her private tea, views on various prime ministers she had worked with over the decades. Observations that were far more candid than anything she had ever expressed publicly. Some of her assessments were surprisingly sharp, even critical, revealing that behind her famous neutrality was a woman with strong opinions and keen political insight. But it was the sealed envelope that contained perhaps the most startling discovery. Princess Anne opened it carefully, breaking the wax seal that her mother had placed there. Inside were two documents. The first was a letter addressed to Anne herself, written in the Queen's hand and dated August of 2022, just weeks before her death. In the letter, Elizabeth explained why she had locked these items away. She wrote that throughout her reign, she had maintained the strictest public discretion, believing that the monarchy's strength lay in its mystique and its separation from ordinary human drama. But she had also recognized that this approach had costs, that it had made her seem cold or distant to some, that it had prevented people from understanding the very real struggles and sacrifices that royal service demanded. The letter expressed Elizabeth's hope that someday, when enough time had passed, these private records might help people understand the reality of her experience. Not to excuse any mistakes she might have made, but simply to show that behind the crown was a human being who had tried her best in impossible circumstances. The second document in the envelope was more explosive. It was a detailed account of a situation from 1983, a crisis that had been kept completely secret from the public. The document described a serious security breach at Buckingham Palace. It's far more severe than the well-known incident with Michael Fagan, who had entered the Queen's bedroom. This breach had involved a threat to the young princes, William and Harry, and had been handled with absolute discretion to avoid public panic and to protect the children. Elizabeth's account revealed the terror she had felt during those days, the sleepless nights, the constant fear for her grandchildren's safety. It also detailed the extraordinary measures that had been taken to address the threat and ensure it never happened again. Measures that had never been publicly acknowledged. The photographs in the safe were equally revealing. They showed private family moments unguarded and genuine in a way that official royal photographs never were. There were pictures of Elizabeth laughing with her children, of tender moments with Prince Philip that the world had never seen. There were also photos from significant state occasions, but with handwritten notes on the back describing what Elizabeth had really been thinking or feeling at those moments. The small wooden box contained personal mementos, a pressed flower from her wedding bouquet, a note from her father written shortly before his death, a tiny pair of baby shoes that had belonged to Prince Charles. Each item represented a memory that Elizabeth had treasured privately, pieces of her personal history that she had kept, separate from her public role. Secrets of the Crown. To understand why Queen Elizabeth had locked these items away, we need to understand the context in which she reigned and the impossible balance she tried to maintain for over 70 years. When Elizabeth became queen in 1952, the British monarchy was still operating under Victorian ideals of royal mystique and distance. The sovereign was meant to be above and apart from ordinary life, a symbol rather than a person. This approach had served the institution well during the reign of her father, George V, VI, whose dignity and reserve had helped the nation through World War II. But Elizabeth's reign would span a period of unprecedented change. She would witness the decline of the British Empire, the rise of mass media, the birth of the Internet age, and ultimately the era of social media where privacy became nearly impossible in public. Appetite for personal information about famous figures became insatiable. Throughout these decades, Elizabeth maintained her approach of strict personal discretion. Anne shared portions of the discovery with other senior members of the family. Each reaction was different. Prince Edward was fascinated by the historical insights. Prince William, as heir to the throne, was particularly interested in his grandmother's reflections on the pressures of royal life and what they might mean for own future. Even Prince Harry, despite his complicated relationship with the institution, was given access to some materials, particularly those relating to his mother Diana. The ripple effect. The discovery of Queen Elizabeth's private papers has created ripples throughout the royal family and the palace establishment, even though the full contents remain secret for now. Word of the safe's existence and the general nature of its contents has spread through palace corridors, and the implications are being debated intensely behind closed doors. For King Charles, the discovery has prompted deep reflection on his own approach to the monarchy. He has always been more open than his mother, more willing to share his opinions and engage publicly with controversial issues. But seeing Elizabeth's private struggles has made him wonder about the wisdom of his approach and whether some discretion might be valuable. At the same time, the documents have validated some of Charles's long-held beliefs. He has always maintained that the monarchy needs to evolve and adapt to remain relevant. And his mother's private acknowledgement of the costs of her approach has reinforced his conviction that change is necessary. For Prince William, who will someday face the same burdens his grandmother carried, the discovery has been particularly significant. The journals reveal Elizabeth's thoughts about the early years of her reign, the challenges of being thrust into supreme responsibility at a young age, and the isolation that came with the crown. These are issues William knows he will face, and having insight into how his grandmother navigated them is invaluable. William has been especially interested in Elizabeth's reflections on balancing public duty with private life, on protecting his children while preparing them for their roles, on maintaining dignity without seeming cold. These are challenges he and Catherine are already confronting, and Elizabeth's experiences offer hard-won wisdom. The discovery has also affected how family members view their own relationships with each other and with the institution. Seeing Elizabeth's private expressions of love and concern for her children, even during periods of public tension, has reminded them of the human bonds that exist beneath the formal structure of royal life. Princess Anne has found herself in an unexpected role as the guardian of these materials and the arbiter of their future. It's a position that has given her new influence within the family, though she wields it carefully. She has been protective of her mother's memory, while also honest about what the documents reveal. Anne has also had to navigate delicate questions from palace staff and advisors about whether any of the information in the safe affects current royal operations or security. The details about the 1983 security breach, for instance, have prompted a comprehensive review of current security protocols to ensure that the lessons learned from that incident remain incorporated into present practice within the broader palace establishment. The discovery has sparked debates about privacy, transparency, and the future of the monarchy in an age where public expectations about openness have changed dramatically. Some advisors argue that strategic release of some materials could humanize the institution and build public sympathy. Others maintain that preserving Elizabeth's privacy, even after her death, is essential to maintaining the monarchy's mystique and dignity. There are also practical questions about preservation and archival responsibility. These documents are historically significant and eventually should be preserved for posterity. But when and how should they be treated like other royal papers that eventually make their way to official archives? Or do they deserve special protection because of their intensely personal nature? The discovery has even affected how the media and public think about Queen Elizabeth, though they don't yet know the full story. The mere fact that such a safe existed, that the Queen kept private journals and documents separate from official records, has fueled speculation and interest. People are curious about what secrets might have been kept, what the true Elizabeth was like behind the carefully maintained public image. For historians and royal biographers, the existence of these materials represents a potential treasure trove of information that could reshape understanding of Elizabeth's reign and the 20th century monarchy. But they also recognize that access to these documents, if it comes at all, might be decades away. What happens next? As of early December 2024, the contents of Queen Elizabeth's safe remain largely secret, known only to Princess Anne, King Charles, and a small number of other senior royals and trusted palace officials. No decision has been made about whether any of the materials will ever be made public, and if so, when and how. Princess Anne continues to serve as the primary guardian of the documents. She has arranged for their proper preservation and storage in a secure location separate from the regular royal archives. She reviews them periodically, sometimes discovering new insights or connections she had missed on earlier readings. King Charles has indicated that he supports eventual limited release of some materials, but not for many years. He believes that certain of his mother's reflections on the nature of monarchy and royal service could be valuable for future generations, but only when released with proper context and at a time when they won't cause unnecessary controversy or pain. There is discussion of creating a comprehensive official biography of Queen Elizabeth that would draw on these private materials. But such a project would take years and would require careful navigation of sensitive family issues. The biographer would need to be someone with both the historical expertise to understand the significance of the materials and the discretion to handle them appropriately. Some within the family and palace establishment advocate for keeping everything locked away permanently, arguing that Elizabeth's wish for privacy should be respected, absolutely, and that the monarchy is better served by maintaining its traditional reserve. They point out that Elizabeth herself chose to lock these items away, and that choice should be honored. But others argue that Elizabeth's letter to Anne shows she anticipated the possibility of eventual disclosure, and that she trusted her daughter to make the right choice. They believe that selective, carefully managed release of some materials, years from now, could serve both historical truth and the monarchy's interests by showing the human reality behind the crown. For now, the safe's contents remain one of the royal family's most closely guarded secrets, a window into Queen Elizabeth's inner life that only a handful of people have been allowed to glimpse. Princess Anne bears the weight of that knowledge and the responsibility of deciding its fate. What is certain is that the discovery has changed how those who knew Elizabeth best think about her reign and her sacrifices. It has revealed the profound cost of the discretion she maintained and the loneliness of her position. It has shown that behind the composed, dignified monarch the world knew was a woman who struggled, doubted, and felt deeply, but who chose to bear those burdens privately rather than compromise the institution she served. The legacy of Queen Elizabeth II will be debated and analyzed for generations to come. Historians will assess her reign, her decisions, her impact on Britain and the Commonwealth and the monarchy itself. But for those who have read her private words, there is a deeper understanding of who she truly was. The woman behind the crown, the human being who spent 70 years trying to balance impossible demands with grace and dignity. Princess Anne's discovery has given the royal family a gift, insight into Elizabeth that they never had while she lived. What they choose to do with that gift will shape not only how history remembers the Queen, but also how the monarchy moves forward into an uncertain future. Behind every crown lies a human heart. Queen Elizabeth II carried her burdens with legendary composure, but the secrets she locked away reveal struggles deeper than the world knew. Princess Anne now holds those truths, and with them the power to reshape our understanding of Britain's longest reigning monarch.